If I'm in a hallucinogenic state and go out and shoot 10 people, right? Even if I was thinking I was fighting demons or something, like I've still shot 10 people. Does you know what I mean? Like there's kind of a hard brutality of the fact there of, it doesn't matter what mental disorder the mom had. She did these things, right? And that kind of the buck stops here, right?
Yeah. And we're recording. All right, what's up, everyone? Welcome to episode number 17 of the Winston Boys podcast, exploring wealth, science, and wisdom through philosophical debates. My name is Kush.
And my name is Alex. And today, so we're going to be talking about a few different things here. For one, we're going to kind of discuss, we're going to discuss kind of where the line for self-defense lies, specifically using the case of Gypsy Rose, who's been the subject of a very interesting recent documentary series on Hulu, and could just kind of talk about where is the legal line and the moral line, of course, for like the principle of self-defense. And then we're also going to talk about. So I I went to see King Kong versus Godzilla last night in an actual movie theater, which was wild. And although it was enjoyable to go see a movie, the script writing was, in my opinion, so egregiously bad that I decided that we needed to talk about like rules for making sci-fi and fantasy movies like comprehensible and like not just ridiculous. And so we're going to talk about kind of how do we think a sci-fi or fantasy world should be constructed and what sort of rules are okay to follow and what sort of rules are okay to break. And also, apologies, this light is like right in the camera. Let me just go turn that one light off. Okay, I will be right back. Okay. So I guess we'll start off with Gypsy Rose here. Are you good to go with that, Kush?
Yeah. Okay.
No,
I'm interested in hearing what this is.
Yeah, so this girl, Gypsy Rose Blanchard, I don't know if I'm saying that right. Basically, her mother had Munchausen by proxy, which is kind of a psychological disorder. In which, so basically Munchausen disease is like when you believe you have stuff that you don't have. So for instance, if I had Munchausen's disorder, I would always be going to the doctor and saying, look, I'm sick with this or that or the other thing. And I would be lying about my symptoms repeatedly and knowing that I was lying about them in order to get like sort of attention and sympathy and stuff from the medical professionals. And so this woman, Dee Dee Blanchard, had Munchausen by proxy, which meant that what she tried to do is she used her daughter and said that a lot of stuff was wrong with her daughter in order to like convince medical professionals to do stuff. It's kind of uncertain. So basically it kind of comes from like a deep-seated, at least the psychological theories, it comes from a deep-seated need to be like a caretaker. So Dee Dee wanted to be a great caretaker for her daughter. And so it kind of stems from this noble, wanting to do something great. But in this case, it had tragic outcomes because basically this woman confined her daughter and acted like her daughter was incredibly like terminally sick for her entire childhood. And this girl grew up like totally isolated and not able to do anything she wanted to do, having no agency, no opportunities to do anything. And so it ended up with the girl met some guy online who was kind of a creeper and convinced him to kill her mom. And so this guy murdered her.
What? Hold on. Like, wait. We gotta like, there's gotta be some
yeah.
like.
So she was like, all right, mom, I don't have cancer. I'm not dying of whatever. You've been lying to me my whole life and making me miserable. Fuck you. I'm going to have this guy kill you. This guy came and
really, like, so was this guy? Was he just like hired, or was he like?
No. He was just like her boyfriend.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's okay.
It's kind of a little bit much.
Yeah. Wait. So I'm curious now. So you said you were debating this. I'm curious what the debate is in this whole story.
The way I've described it probably doesn't do it justice. I personally have not watched the docuseries, but I've done a little bit of research on her. And I think that it's a pretty egregious case of abuse, right? Um, in which the mother was really, I mean, she really kind of destroyed this gypsy's life in every possible way, from convincing her that she was unwell and unable to walk or do basic daily activities, to keeping her home from school. I mean, the woman controlled every aspect of her life and constantly had her undergoing surgeries and procedures and on all sorts of medicine she didn't need. I mean, she really did incredible harm to this. I mean, I can't overstate how much harm she did to this girl, her daughter, right?
Yeah.
And so the debate was, my girlfriend Val was of the opinion that she got sent to prison for having her mom killed. And she was set to be released pretty soon. I don't think she only got like 10 years in prison or something. It wasn't a very long time for the severity of the offense, right? Conspiracy to murder. But so I think they were pretty lenient on her sentencing. But Val and a lot of people, there's a whole hashtag free gypsy thing apparently online where a lot of people think that she shouldn't be in jail because her mom did such terrible things to her that she shouldn't have been punished for conspiring to murder her, right?
Well, I mean, what? So, like, did she have her mom murdered because that's what it would take for her to be free, or did she just do it because she was mad? Because I think those are two different things.
Yeah, and that is kind of what what I wanted to talk about today. So I think that the thing Val was kind of going towards was that it was in self-defense. In other words, like Gypsy had no choice except to murder her mom because that was the only way she could get away from her mom's abuse. And as such, she was kind of acting in an immature and powerless way because she had been babied and made powerless throughout years of victimization, right? Which is fair. She kind of acted out and, it's one of those things. It's like, perhaps the only way, because Gypsy had so little power and in the eyes of the law, she was inept and all that and couldn't take care of herself. The only way she could break free was through a sudden violent act like that, right? Where she just killed her, right? And that's kind of the argument that people have been putting forth to say, she shouldn't have been thrown in jail because she was really acting in self-defense and she had no recourse. The mother had too much power over her to be like talked out of it or, stopped by the law or something.
Wait, how old was she like when this happened?
Oh, like, she was born in 1991. I think her mother was murdered in 2015. Let me check the article.
But she was an adult then, right?
She was an adult, yes.
So I'm confused how the mother had power over her once she was already an adult. Like, can't you just leave at that point?
My understanding is that she had legal guardianship or whatever because she had convinced everyone Gypsy was like critically ill.
Oh, so
imagine like I was critically ill and had a bunch of problems, and so my parents were still my legal proxies because I had to stay at home, right?
Yeah, or like if your parents are like really old and then like you get power of attorney or something.
Right, yeah, right? It's just like that. Yeah, just like that.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, so anyway, I just kind of wanted to ask your opinion. What's kind of your initial reaction here?
I mean, I'm trying to figure out the whole situation. I mean, it seems so the mom had power over her. I mean, I don't know. I'm wondering like what else she could have done, like if she could have gone to like the police or like what did she try to do anything?
I have no idea. I don't know how much documentation there is of that. I think that one thing we have to be careful of here is that we're looking at this from a very different perspective than Gypsy would have been looking at it. In which Gypsy really wasn't educated, or I mean, like, yeah, you and I could have gone to the police, but like she was viewed by the law as a very incompetent, through no fault of her own, but a very incompetent person who was unable to care for herself physically or any other way. And so I don't know how effective going to the police would have been, right? If you had a mentally handicapped kid who went to the police and claimed their parents were abusing them, and the parents who had always been in good standing and, doctors were there to back up the parents, right? The parents said, no, this kid doesn't know what he's talking about, right? Then I think oftentimes I don't know how effective that would be for the, mentally handicapped kid. and that's kind of I don't think she was viewed as mentally handicapped, but I mean she had been critically ill for most
Yeah.
of her life and wasn't legally able to take care of herself, is my understanding.
But also, I mean, also, because I know you also mentioned like surgery. So was it just like her mom was faking mental illness, or was it also like physical like things that like her mom
Oh
was
no,
saying
her
she
mom
had?
wasn't. Her mom was. Sorry, let me be very clear. Her mom was faking that she had illnesses. So it's like if,
Yeah.
so it's like if my mom were pretending that I had cancer and was dying of cancer, and it convinced me that I was also dying of cancer, and then had me undergoing chemotherapy. I
Yeah.
don't know
But
exactly what illnesses she was faking, but yeah, that's
yeah,
the
but
premise.
I guess what I'm saying is if she's faking that her daughter has like something physical, like cancer or like something like that, right? Like wouldn't like a surgeon or a doctor or someone like notice that she doesn't have that at some point? Like
You would think.
I'm confused how that works.
I don't know. And again, I have not watched the documentary series. I don't know how good the documentary series is. It sounded like they took some creative liberties.
Yeah.
I'm generally rather skeptical of documentaries. I've watched too many documentaries that just like, I don't know. I watched Cowspiracy, and then I found out like a few years later that most of the stuff they cited in there was like they picked and chose from like certain papers that were later discredited and just didn't mention that they were discredited. So like some
Mm.
obscure Brazilian study that no one ever had any stock with, and then they found serious issues with it, is like what they based most of the documentary on. So like it's really hard to say in cases like this where the facts aren't ever really established all the way, um, how much power Gypsy would have had to go to the police. But I would say that I mean I'm on your side here. That's kind of been my point the whole time. Is like, well, obviously the mom's a dick. Okay.
Yeah.
And I think that if she was truly mentally ill and really didn't know she was doing this and really thought her daughter was sick, that alleviates her of wrongdoing as an agent. It doesn't alleviate her of wrongdoing. You know what? I don't care like how mentally ill someone is. What they do is still what they do. They may not be blameworthy for it, but they're still doing it. Does that make sense? If I'm in a hallucinogenic state and go out and shoot 10 people, right? Even if I was thinking I was fighting demons or something, like I've still shot 10 people. Does you know what I mean? Like there's kind of a
Yeah.
hard brutality of the fact there of, it doesn't matter what mental disorder the mom had. She did these things, right? And that kind of the buck stops here, right?
Yeah.
And she may
I'm
not have been
curious.
doing those things intentionally, which maybe, that alleviates her morally, but she still did these things. I
Yeah.
don't know.
But I'm curious, going back to the original thing. I'm curious, like, so Val was saying that like she like was right to have her mom killed. So were you
Not
arguing that she wasn't right to have her mom killed?
Yes, I'm definitely arguing that murdering her mother was not the way to go. I think
Yeah,
there are very, very few situations. I don't think that there's really any permissible time to murder your mother unless she has like a knife to your throat or something, right? And there's no other way to do it.
yeah.
Um, and that's where I wanted to get into self-defense. So tell me, I don't know, what does self-defense mean to you? I don't know.
Well, I mean, I actually I still have something I
Sorry,
want
go
to
ahead, go ahead.
because like it's like I kind of agree with Val based on what I've learned so far because it's like if you're saying that like her mom has like power of attorney or whatever over her, so her mom makes the decisions, she can't go to the police, like she's being like force fed drugs she doesn't want to take. Like if that's like the scenario, then like I don't know. Like I mean it's pretty similar to like being kidnapped. Like I don't think like if you were kidnapped and like you were tied up in someone's basement and the only way to get out was to kill them, like I don't think that would.
Oh, I 100% agree. I don't think that it was that bad in this case because she was able to meet a guy and have a boyfriend and
That's
talk with
that.
him
Yeah,
and
that's
stuff.
true.
Like I think that she had options. Now at the same time, what I'm doing here is running the risk of kind of being an armchair general, right? Which is, um, I think it's very unfair, and I really hate it when people years after the fact, once more things are available, right? Of course, Colonel Custard shouldn't have Custard, right? Have you heard of Custard's Last Stand? Custard,
Uh,
the guy who
no,
like
I'm
battled a Little Bighorn. So there was like some really brash American general who like marched into Native American territory and was like ambushed by like 10,000 of their like soldiers and like lost his entire troop and died. It's called Custer's Last Stand. And it's kind of like a big historical moment because it was like a big defeat for the U.S. military at the time. But obviously, like, or, if you look back at the Roman generals in the battle of, what was that battle? When Hannibal encircled and killed like 80,000 Roman troops, right? I can't remember what it was called. But like it was a massive defeat for Rome. It was almost the end of Rome, right? Carthage almost beat Rome right then and there. And obviously very stupid in hindsight, but you're in saying that, you're saying in hindsight, right? And that's a very big thing, right? So like the only thing I'm afraid of in my position is that in hindsight, I think that Gypsy Rose had a lot of other opportunities than to killing her mom, right? I don't know that at the time she could have been expected to know about those other ways of action, right? Does that make sense? Like, oftentimes I think that after the fact, it's very easy to unfairly judge someone because you're aware of things they weren't aware of at the time.
Yeah, and I think the other thing too is just like I'm trying to piece together like what the whole situation was, but I feel like there's just like different information could make it seem different, and I feel like I just don't have I feel like I would have a different take based on the way that I saw that how that whole situation looked like with her and her mom.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the general consensus is that the mom was very kind to her, and everyone could see that. I mean, like the general perception, and of course, details are disputed, right? This is a person versus person abuse case stemming from early childhood that no one really knew what was going on except for the mother and the daughter, obviously. So I'm not defending the woman by any means. I'm not defending Dee Dee. But I am saying that the mother clearly had a mental illness, and it's uncertain whether or not she was aware that what she was doing was wrong or in bad faith at all, right? And again, there's sort of the brutality of the fact, right? Where, a person with mental illness who does bad things is still a person doing bad things. But I think it kind of softens the blow. Whereas I don't think the mother was necessarily an evil person, right? Out to torture her daughter. I don't believe that was the case, right? There's no way to prove that. I'm just saying that's not what I'm getting here. I don't think that anyone who saw these two interacting thought that was the case. It was clear there was a mother-daughter love there. And it's just that as the daughter grew up, she came to realize that her mother was trapping her in this situation. And it's unclear how much of that was intentional, right? Obviously, if that was totally intentional, the mother wasn't really psychologically ill. She just wanted to treat her daughter like a sick child. That's a different situation,
Yeah.
But it's really hard to tell after the fact, I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, for instance, right, just to indicate the severity of the abuse. Here, I'm going to quote from this article. When Gypsy was 8 years old, Dee Dee described her as suffering from leukemia and muscular dystrophy and said she required a wheelchair and a feeding tube. The list of medical problems Dee Dee related about her daughter went on to include seizures, asthma, hearing, and visual impairments. I mean, she was sleeping using like a breathing machine and stuff. It was pretty severe.
But this was all stuff that like she had just told other people and like she was doing at home, right? Like she never actually took her to a hospital and like they never actually did.
No, they did. Right? They did.
Oh, they did?
Yes. And
wait, how?
That's a whole issue with the medical system.
Dude, how would a surgeon or a doctor not notice that like the mom is making all that stuff up though? Like I feel like I don't get that.
Well, if I have a seizure as a little kid, it only lasts for 10 minutes, let's say. And by the time I get to the hospital, my seizure's over.
Yeah.
I think as a doctor, you have to assume that the parents aren't just spending money on taking their kid to the hospital for fun and claiming he had a seizure.
Yeah, but like, I mean, so you have a seizure and then like, what do you do? Like as a doctor, like, I mean, obviously I'm not a doctor. I don't know anything about it, but like, I feel like they'd have to like investigate or something before they just give her medicine.
I think it's kind of insane that I mean, I think it's definitely a failure of the medical system to say this kid has muscular dystrophy when they clearly don't have muscular dystrophy.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
muscular dystrophy is not like, you can tell when someone has muscular dystrophy because they don't have any muscles and they can't move. Okay.
Yeah.
Like they can't walk and stuff. Like, I don't know how they missed that, to be honest with you. That's pretty bad. Yeah, I don't know the specifics of that. I'm sure there were reasons. In general, I'm pretty trusting of medical professionals. And I think they try to do the right things. Obviously, they're human. There's a really great story. There was a study done, I forget when, in like the 70s or 80s or something. And these like 7 or 8 psychologists or something, I think they were psychologists or psych students, all checked into mental institutions after having claimed to have been hearing voices. They just walked in and they said they were hearing voices and described other symptoms of schizophrenia, but they never showed any symptoms, and they just acted normal and hung out in like the mental hospital, like for a few months, right? Until they were released. They would just like try to get out as fast as they can. It took them all like a long time, like a few months. And they were all diagnosed with schizophrenia and medicated, even though they never showed any symptoms in front of the doctors. They just walked in and were like, oh yeah, we're having schizophrenia symptoms. And then took months to get back out. It's kind of wild.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with them. Yeah. There was nothing wrong with the people either. It was crazy.
Yeah, that's not good the way that works. Like, I feel like there's gotta be something.
I don't know, man.
How does that even work with like a mental hospital? Like, if you check yourself in, like you don't get to have a say in when you leave.
Pretty much, yeah. I don't know. I'm deeply. This is kind of a stereotypical philosophy thing. Is like, I don't know. Most psychologists describe human mental illness and stuff as like a and human behavior as like a causal chain. In other words, like I'm an animal with hormones and different physiological processes that cause me to act in a certain way under certain circumstances. And if I have an angry outburst, it's because there's a chemical causing me to have an angry outburst, right? Whereas philosophers kind of approach it from the exact opposite angle, which is I'm an agent who chooses to act in a certain way, right? Or at least that's some philosophers aren't that extreme. That's kind of my view, is like we all make choices, right? And like we all kind of determine how we act. In other words, we're responsible for what we do. I think it's kind of insane to claim anything to the contrary, right? But it kind of tends to put philosophers, like my sister's a psych major, and we always get into debates where it's like, oh, well, this person was mentally ill, right, when they did this. And so they, and I'm like, okay, well, like define mental, like prove it. And you know what I mean? Like, and two, like, okay, they did bad things. I'm calling them a bad person, right? If I murder people, I don't care if I'm mentally ill or not. Like, I'm a bad person unless I was delusional. You know what I mean? Like, if I think I'm like killing demons or something, that's a different situation. But if I'm having a chemical imbalance that makes me really angry and hormonal, and then I go kill people, I don't think that really helps. You know what I mean? I think that that it's pretty limited. Like you have really, I don't know. Like I said, it puts us at odds. It puts the psychologist at odds with the philosopher a little bit there. But so this, it's a very complicated situation, that's for sure.
Yeah. Again, I think if there were more details, I might have more takes. But with the given details, that's my take.
Yeah. So I was gonna kind of propose 3 little rules for self-defense, and then kind of judge her case on that. So like my ideas were, so in defending myself, right? I just thought about this for a few hours last night because I was really interested in it. So if I'm defending myself in a given circumstance, I think I should use the minimum force possible, right? So let's say, Val just loses it with me and tries to beat me up. Okay. That doesn't mean I grab my knife and murder my girlfriend. Okay. Cause she slapping me cause she's upset. Okay. Like, you know what I mean? Yeah. That means I like grab her hands and hold on to him cause like she's smaller than me and she's not like in danger. Like I'm not in danger. Right. On the other hand, right, if some guy like walks into my dorm with a gun and tries to shoot me, right, and I grab a knife and stab him, like I think that's a very different situation, because in that case, the minimum force required for me to like avoid serious risk of harm was like killing the person, right? Whereas in the other case, it was like, it's very easy to remove myself from the situation, or like, employ like non-injurious force to, resolve it, right? Because like the threat isn't like existential to me. And so I think that also means like, I think that means kind of there has to be an immediacy. There has to be like an immediate threat. You have to use the minimum force necessary to diffuse the immediate threat, which means if I think someone's going to be a danger to me in the future, I can't just go up and murder them because they may or may not do something in the future, right? Unless I'm like really certain, right? A really good example of this is maybe Enough. Have you seen the movie Enough with J-Lo in it, where she like kills her abusive husband?
I haven't, but I have a different example.
Okay,
that's
go ahead.
Like kind of recent.
Right.
Like I've actually so every time I watch the news now, they're always showing like the Derek Chauvin trial for like the last 2 weeks. So that's the defense's argument, is that Derek Chauvin showed up, like these two officers were having trouble arresting George Floyd, like he wouldn't get in the car,
right?
Again, because he was high, he didn't want to go to jail,
right?
And so like he's not being violent, he's just not getting in the car, and he's like 6'6", like 200 something pounds. They can't. Yeah,
he's a big dude. I saw him. He was a big ass dude for sure.
And so what they're saying, like what the defense's whole argument was, is that this dude's like 6'6", he's 200 something pounds, he's resisting arrest, right? Because he's not getting in the car. Mm-hmm. And so like they were like, oh, then they had to put him down on the ground, like in handcuffs, like laying down. And then they're saying like even then he was resisting arrest, which is why Derek Chauvin did what he did. Which, I mean, I still don't agree with their argument, because for half the time his knee was on his neck, he was dead. So I mean, it's pretty clear. But like, it's like,
if the guy's not breathing, you can't claim it's self-defense anymore.
Yeah, it's pretty clear. Like, but I was just thinking it's interesting because like that's their argument there, is that it was self-defense.
Absolutely, and it wasn't. Like, I mean, I under this circumstance, like, again, you have to, self-defense means using the minimum amount of force to prevent immediate harm to yourself. And I mean, minimum amount means like, I'm sure that person can't immediately harm me right now, right? That can be a lot. That can require killing someone. In that case, fine. You're justified in killing that person in self-defense, if that's what you need to reasonably think that they can't hurt you in the immediate future, right? It'd be a very different circumstance if George Floyd was coming at him with a knife, okay? I would have been like, yeah, shoot the guy, right? Like, that's fine, right? If he's coming at you with a knife, you can shoot him. But if he's on the ground, he's begging to breathe, he's in handcuffs, there's no threat to you whatsoever. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, there just isn't. Like, I can't, and it's on video, but I mean, like, look, don't be high on fentanyl. Don't resist arrest. Bad behavior. Don't do that, okay? But that's not self-defense, right?
Yeah.
And there's no way to justify killing the guy over that, right? There just isn't.
Yeah, so, dude, I mean, they were literally showing like, I mean, they actually didn't. So the video that we all see, right? He dies in that video.
Yeah.
Right? So we all watched him die. I mean, obviously everyone's seen that. There was a picture of him when they're doing the autopsy of like his face all scraped up and his shoulder all scraped up, because he was pressing like his face and his shoulder into the ground to try and be able to breathe. And it was so graphic that they showed him dying, obviously all over TV. That photo was so graphic that they didn't show it on TV. They handed it out to everyone in the room, like on like a printed piece of paper.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah. So it's like that. There's like a lot like that. I think that case, like, I mean, self-defense doesn't make sense to me as like a defense for that.
No, I mean,
and I'm not a lawyer, so.
No, but I mean, it doesn't. Like, I think, like I said, I think a pretty clear definition is the one I just said. I mean, I think that's kind of the legal definition too, is like, you can do whatever you need to do to defend yourself, but you can't do more than that. Defense requires that you're defending yourself. Now, as a police officer, I would say this, right? And I'm not defending the officer or whatever, Derek Chauvin or whatever. I'm not defending that guy. What I'm saying is a police officer has another duty besides self-defense, which is arresting people, right? And I think you could argue that, if they think someone is armed and dangerous or something like that, or a danger to the public, then they could, even if there's no immediate danger to them, they could exercise lethal force in order to restore public order, right? I think that's a different argument than self-defense, but self-defense is obviously wrong. And I think that one's obviously wrong because, again, if the guy's on the ground in handcuffs, I don't know who he's an immediate and present danger to, right?
Yeah.
I mean, again, put him on the ground, put him in handcuffs, make sure he's secure, and then get off of him and hold him secure. You know what I mean? Call for backup, whatever, right? Get 10 other police officers there. You know what I mean? But there's the disparity of power there. It's just, self-defense again, or any sort of defense, right? I mean, bringing the arrest to successful conclusion. He didn't have to kill the guy or exercise that level of force at all to bring the arrest to a successful conclusion, right? Like that just wasn't necessary. He was going to jail, he was going to go to trial, like as he should have, right? I mean, I would say that, I think that asking if the arrest was legitimate. I mean, it seems to have been a legitimate reason for the police officer to stop the guy and to arrest him. It does not seem to have been a legitimate reason to kill him. You know what I mean? Very deliberately.
No, I remember earlier in the trial, they brought in like the clerk from the store because they wanted to tell the full story. And the full story was like literally like you see him in the store. He's clearly on something, but he's not like bothering anyone. Like he's just doing his thing. And then like what the clerk said is that like they have like a policy in their store, which is kind of messed up, but they have a policy in their store where if you accept the counterfeit like bill or whatever, then you have to pay for that counterfeit bill out of your own like wage. And so he said that the 20 was obviously counterfeit, like he said when he saw it. But then he was like, all right, I don't really want to deal with this today. Like, I'll just pay $20 out of my wage. And then he said after that, like he just went and told his manager, he's like, can we do something about this? And then his manager said, okay, go out there and talk to him. And then he went out there and talked to him twice and he wasn't doing anything. And then they call the cops. And then next thing you know, like he walks back out and the whole thing is going on.
Right. And again, and I think an important point to see here is like George Floyd isn't on trial here. And again, it seems like the officer was justified in attempting to make an arrest, right? Right. There was definitely sufficient reason, whatever, what's the term? I can't remember the legal term, but sufficient
like
reason.
Cause.
Right. Whatever. Yeah. Probable cause. There was clearly probable cause here, right? It seemed to be a pretty self-evident act of, some sort of crime. In progress, but and I don't think it was wrong for the guy I feel kind of bad because I read that like the clerk felt really bad for calling the cops, and I'm like, you didn't cause this, man. Like you know what I mean? Like it's not the clerk's fault, right? I think the clerk did nothing wrong by calling the cops. The cops should have come, arrested George Floyd peacefully and responsibly, and if he had resisted arrest, they should have, used the minimum amount of force required to prevent him from escaping or whatever, right? Concluded the arrest, taken him to stand trial, whatever, right? That's how justice works. Not killing someone in the street for no good reason, in self-defense. I mean, it's just so ludicrous, right? That's just ludicrous. But so anyway, to continue, what was vengeance. So like, self-defense does not include vengeance, right? And that's kind of evident from the first rule, right? And I think that kind of applies to the George Floyd case as well, where like it kind of seems like the guy was like, oh yeah, you're like fighting back against me, so I'm really going to show you who's boss, right? Like, you know what I mean? Like that's kind of the sense I got. Where, like I think that was kind of the cops like, okay, well I'm going to show him who's boss, and I don't know, like that's not self-defense at all, right?
No, it does seem like more of a case of like vengeance. And I'll just mention real quick, I think we're at like 33-ish minutes.
Oh my goodness.
So, like, I mean, I think we can go to like an hour-ish. Like, that's fine,
let's go to the next plot here. And the last point, my last point for self-defense was like no retroactive judgment, which as I already mentioned, like, for Gypsy Rose, I think it's a pretty clear, just to kind of sum up what I think, I think she fails on the first count, right? Which is she didn't use the minimum force required. There were other ways to do it. At the same time, I think the jury or a judge or whatever was right to sentence her lightly because obviously it was a pretty extreme case. And while what she did was wrong and, participating in murder or whatever, you gotta make some allowance for the fact of what an insane example of abuse,
Yeah.
right?
I'll say my last take on that's different though.
Yeah,
I think
go
it
ahead.
depends on I think like my last take would be I think it depends on the details of the case. Because if it was, yeah, like I know we're saying like she obviously was free enough to go meet a boyfriend or whatever. But if it is a case where it's like really similar to kidnapping, then I'm not sure if I agree with that wasn't like the minimum required force.
Yeah.
Because if she was basically kidnapped, it's like, I mean, you've got limited options.
I would say that she wasn't kidnapped I mean, she was like out and going to the hospital and meeting people and this and that. Like
Yeah.
she was like, she was confined, but she wasn't like tied up in a basement. And I think that's what makes the difference for me. But I agree that there are certainly circumstances where you could be right, and it could be that was the minimum force, and in which case, I think she should have been freed on the self-defense case, the self-defense argument. Okay, so on to sci-fi here. So again, I went to go see King Kong versus Godzilla, which was awesome to be in a movie theater again.
Yeah,
but man,
I'm sorry. I know you're about to get into like some actual stuff.
No, go ahead.
I was just, so what is it like? Like, what are movie theaters like now that they're opening back up?
Oh boy, yeah, I guess that's an interesting question.
Like, I'm just curious, like, what the whole like? Did you guys have to sit apart? Like,
yeah. So we went and we made reservations for I think it was 7 people. My suite, actually 8 people. So my suite, my sister. So there's 6 of us living in a suite together. So obviously we don't wear masks around each other because we're all live together. And then my sister, who's dating one of my friends, and she doesn't wear a mask around her boyfriend, obviously. And then my girlfriend, who's dating me, we kiss and stuff, so we're also not too obsessed with social distancing. We're also mostly vaccinated in our suite. A lot of us work in labs and stuff, or I also Wake Forest has been really great about offering vaccination clinics, so I think almost all of us are partially or fully vaccinated by now. I can't remember exactly who isn't. I think 1 or 2 of us aren't vaccinated at all, but as a group we have a fairly low risk, right? All young and stuff. So the movie theater allowed us all to sit together. We were probably about 10 feet away, 10 to 12 feet away, like a couple rows away from anyone else. We were required to wear masks while we weren't eating or drinking. Obviously, that wasn't really enforced, and since we were all kind of snacking on popcorn the whole time, we weren't too worried about that. Also, there weren't that many other people in the movie theater. There were probably like 20 people in a big theater, spread out. So it felt pretty safe. I don't know. It felt very responsible. More safe than like most times I've gone out to eat, honestly.
So, oh, really?
Yeah.
So was it like relatively empty, or because I know King Kong versus Godzilla is like a big release, right?
Yeah, it is, but it was really empty. Yeah. I think they took a special care to make sure it was very empty. I don't think they were selling a lot of tickets.
Was it the Grand?
Yeah, it was at the Grand. That's on University, right? Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. I mean, those are pretty big theater. I'm surprised it was like empty when the room is so like big.
Well, I don't know. I didn't do a head count or anything, but it seemed really empty. I mean, there were like clusters of people spread out very distantly.
Yeah, no, I understand what you're saying.
And my understanding is like they sold it in kind of like in parties. So like they would sell a group of seats to a group of people, and then sell another group of seats like socially distanced from the other group, right? So like basically you weren't socially distanced within your group, but you were socially distanced between groups, right? So like you could go out to see the movie with the people you live with, right? And not cross-contaminate any other households, so to speak.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of the principle behind it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So, but I mean, I thought to the movie.
Yeah.
That movie was aggressively bad. It was fun to watch certain parts of it, like, big dinosaur with fire breath versus big gorilla fight, fun, I don't hate on that. Okay. That's a good time. And obviously I wasn't expecting some sort of academic or, theatrically brilliant production. Like that's not what it's for. I'm here to see dinosaur breathe fire on gorilla. Okay. It's not an intellectually deep movie. but it wasn't even like, it didn't even live up to those meager expectations. Okay, it was just aggressively bad. I mean, so I obviously, spoiler alert. Okay, spoiler is kind of like a generous term because there's really not that much to spoil. Pretty much goes about like you would think. But I mean, for instance, right? Some of the characters traveled via tunnel. I'm not making this shit up. I would never make this up. This is too wild. They traveled via tunnel instead of like taking a cargo ship. They got locked in a container and traveled via magnetic tunnel from the panhandle of Florida.
Yeah.
You know where that is? Like North Florida?
Yeah.
Right? Like right under Alabama or whatever, right? To Hong Kong.
Was it like through the earth or like around, just under the ground?
I don't know. But I can't think of a more inefficient way to ship a container, right? Like this was like some sort of high-tech corporation that had unlimited resources. And one of my friends was like, there was like this whole like hollow earth thing that like there were passages under the earth that were interconnected and stuff, which didn't make sense on its own, but that's a different problem. Right? But maybe they were using that. That's fine. But they still took the trouble to take one of these passages that was super dangerous and no one knew how to use them correctly or whatever, and code it with like magnetic, like magnetron things, basically, is what it seemed like they were doing. They were using like magnetic fields to accelerate the container through this tunnel. And they lined it with those and constructed it for like, I don't know, like probably 10,000 miles at least, right? I don't know how far that would be going under the earth from Hong Kong. But I mean, like, and not to mention, I mean, dealing with magma and whatnot, right? Like, why not take a boat? You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, it seems like if they had that technology though, where like, I mean, it's the shortest route and like, there's no friction. Like you shoot it through. Like it seemed, I mean, that's
the other thing. That's the other thing. They accelerated the container, a big square container, to 900 miles an hour or something, 800 miles an hour. Right.
Yeah.
You know why planes fly at 30,000 feet?
No.
Because if they were flying at 500 miles an hour at surface, like air density, it would be so inefficient, right? Like the air is so much denser down here, right? It's like a quarter or something of what it is down here at 30,000 feet. That's why if you hike Mount Everest, you got to bring oxygen because you can't breathe up there, right? Same kind of problem here, right? I mean, if you go down below the earth, the air pressure gets really insane, right? This tunnel is going to have a ton of air pressure, right? I mean, if you're 3,000 feet down there, or I don't know, let's say 10,000 feet down, right? The air pressure is going to be really, really heavy, right? Probably almost double what it is at the surface, okay? Maybe even 50% more. But going at 800 miles an hour in a square container through and not only that, but it was a narrow tunnel, right? I mean, the container barely had room to get through. So like, it would have been displacing that air, you know what I mean? Like in a small tunnel. So the air is going to push back really hard and it's a lot of dense air. So like, the idea that a super unaerodynamic shipping container basically could be shot through something like that at 800 miles an hour without like overheating or like, you know, having some sort of explosion just from compressed air building up in the tunnel being pushed along in front of this thing as it zooms along at like hypersonic speeds is ludicrous. Even if you could justify the expense of building this tunnel, even if you were using an existing passage. Anyway, so that was just one thing, right? But I mean, the other issue was pretty much it was like the rest of the world had like 2021 technology, and then this one corporation was like, oh, we're like Star Wars but more powerful. Like they pretty much had anti-gravity engines. They were able to build robot, basically the Terminator version of Godzilla, right? They had Mecha Godzilla. It was like the Terminator as Godzilla, like okay, like
oh, so the Godzilla in this movie wasn't like an actual.
No, there was an actual Godzilla and a robot Godzilla, right? So like if they had a technology and their scheme was like, oh, we're gonna take over the world with like robot Godzilla, basically, and it was like, why not just use any of the rest of your technology to do this? Why do you need a robot Godzilla?
Yeah.
If you can tunnel under the earth, dude, you've already won. Just march into the US Capitol and say we're in control now, okay? And like you'll be in control. You have anti-gravity drives, okay? Like, come on.
Yeah.
I don't know. But and the other ridiculous thing. So they go down into like this chamber. It was kind of like, have you read Journey to the Center of the Earth by Jules Verne?
I don't think so. It sounds
Basically,
familiar, but I don't know.
it's like imagine that like there's a world existing in the middle of the earth, like the earth just keeps going down. Kind of a cool idea. That's kind of what they did here, and I have no problem with that, except it was really poorly executed, but that's a whole nother issue. The issue with me was Godzilla. The main characters were hanging out with King Kong in Hollow Earth, like, you know, however many thousands of miles below the surface. Okay, I mean the radius of Earth is like 5,000 miles. Okay, something like that. And they were like at least halfway through. So I mean like 2,000 miles of rock, okay, and magma and whatever else. And so Godzilla is having a bad day and looking for King Kong. And so he looks down at the earth and blows a hole from the surface to Hollow Earth. Which,
like
judging
2,000
from the
feet down?
No, 2,000 miles down.
Oh yeah, miles, my bad.
Like, how? I mean, what are you thinking? So for one, the way Hollow Earth works is it's like there's another layer of Earth, basically, right? It's not just hollow. It's like there's like another sphere, basically, that has like an ecosystem around it, right? So for one, they just happened to be at the same point King Kong was at on that thing. So King Kong could just look straight down and drill down, and like his little fiery tunnel would come out where the main characters were. Like that's alone is dumb. Okay. Like it's super unlikely. Okay. It probably landed like 100 miles away from them. Okay. And for two, how powerful is his breath that he's able to dig through? First of all, if you tried to dig through it by like just melting through the rock, you would melt the surrounding rock. So it would just like, you know, it's like trying to melt a hole through an ice sheet with a blowtorch, right? Like eventually, sure, the blowtorch is hot. You'll dig a hole in the ice. But at a certain point, the water's just going to start filling the hole. You see what I'm saying? Like you can't melt your way through a solid like that far, because the liquid that you're generating, the melted solid, is going to fill it. Even if you're just vaporizing it, what's in front of you, like it's going to be so hot that the sides of the hole are going to melt, right? Like, because he's realized he's digging down with his fire going all the way down, like melting through the rock all the way down this hole for ostensibly thousands of miles. So how, I mean, it's so implausible on so many levels, right? Because for one, his breath would have to be so ridiculously powerful, he'd be leveling the whole continent. For two, he'd be melting the rock, so it would just be flowing in, right? It's like digging a hole in the sand at a certain point. And for three, once you dig down that far, the rock's just gonna flow in on its own because there's so much pressure. And four, there was like this weird like wormhole thing almost. I mean, that's the best way I can describe it. They went through like this weird gravitational inversion, and then all of like this weird special effects. Like it really looked like when they went through a wormhole in Interstellar, and they just didn't have that for the hole. So I'm like, whatever bullshit explanation you have for Hollow Earth, somehow this hole just like melted right through it.
Yeah.
So it just so my point was I thought we could kind of come up with, you know, 3 ideas, right? I don't know. So what do you think are good? What do you think are good principles for sci-fi to not just have these things where, you know, you can be creative, but you can't just, you know, break your own rules, I guess is my point. I don't know. How do you think sci-fi authors should kind of approach this sort of thing?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I wouldn't really, I'm not the physics one, but I will say, like, I think the like one thing that might be important to consider is that like important to consider when writing these 3 rules is that the whole point of like one of these action movies is just to have like a lot of stuff happening on the screen. So it's kind of like what could they do that's still like in line with physics where they're still having all this stuff happening on the screen?
Let me be clear. do not want sci-fi writers to follow physics.
Yeah.
99% of the time. Like, I'm fine. I love Star Trek. I have no problem with warp drives, man, because they say warp drives do this thing. And then warp drives do that thing. And I'm perfectly fine to say, okay, warp drives do that thing. I have no problem with that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
What I have a problem with is when they have Godzilla's nuclear breath doing several things that clearly don't line up with each other and don't make sense within its own explanations, right? I mean, King Kong takes a blast of Godzilla's breath, and if it's powerful enough to drill through the Earth's crust thousands of miles, I'm like, dude, Godzilla would have been paste, okay? Or sorry, King Kong would have been paste, okay? There'd been nothing left. Yeah, I don't know. So for me, like, as a physicist, right? Oh, whoops. As a physicist, I have no problem with creative liberties and breaking the laws of physics. That's fine. But, like, do it in a way that makes sense. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, I guess I wouldn't know what those are. You know what I mean?
Like, what makes sense?
Yeah. So I think like that might be the question to ask is like what are the things that are like so like removed from what makes sense that you wouldn't want
How
in there?
about, have you read Harry Potter?
I watched some of the movies
Okay.
from earlier.
So you're familiar with it. Okay.
Yeah.
So let's take Harry Potter, right? Obviously, Harry Potter doesn't follow the rules of physics, and that's fine with me, right? I mean, come on. You want to cast spells out of a magic wand. That's kind of the premise of the universe. Like, I don't have any expectation for you to follow physics. And I'm not shitting on Harry Potter. I like Harry Potter. It's a good story. But her magic is oftentimes contradictory. The laws of her universe change from start to finish, right? As in, at the beginning, there are the food is appearing magically, and Dumbledore is summoning the food with a snap of his fingers. And later on, it turns out there's an entire cafeteria of enslaved house elves that are making the food that's then being magically transported onto the tables, right? Like, but that wasn't the initially what was going on. Like, initially it was just Dumbledore making it, right? And then, you know, things like all of a sudden wands had an allegiance, right? Wands did not care who was using them. They were like guns, basically. Anyone could use anyone's wand, whatever. Although, like, different, like, you know, you'd have a wand you preferred, but there was no such thing as wand allegiance, right? Until the 7th book, when all of a sudden she was like, okay, well, now there's wand allegiance halfway through the 7th book. And that's kind of how Harry ends up defeating Voldemort, is like through a wand allegiance, and it's kind of convoluted. But, like, I didn't love that, but it made sense, right? Like, she made additional rules that weren't initially present, and it's clear they weren't initially present, but at least it didn't break earlier rules. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And that's something, I guess, like, technology or magic shouldn't do the logically impossible, and it shouldn't break its own rules, if that makes sense. So, like, if in Harry Potter, J.K. Rowling started off with, okay, you can't bring the dead back to life, and she ended with, you can't bring the dead back to life, right? There was no way to undo death with magic. And so, you know, things like that, right? Where it's consistent. The universe follows its own rules, right? You can take whatever creative liberties you want to in creating it, but it needs to follow its own rules. Does that make sense? I guess that's that's my point.
So it seems like what you're saying is like one thing that would be really important is just like whatever like rules like you put out there like just need to be consistent for like how that universe works.
That's my idea. And so, like, for Star Trek, right? You know, oftentimes they're not consistent. But to be fair, Star Trek goes from like the 1960s to the present day. And so you can't really expect them to be consistent that whole time. It's different script writers. They're going to lose track of stuff, right? So, like, that's a little bit different. And or Star Wars, right? Star Wars has some pretty clear, like, inconsistencies with how things work. And they don't, like, I mean, the most recent thing, right? Somehow Palpatine has returned. How? He just did. Don't ask questions. He just did. We're never going to explain it. He's back. Like, you know what I mean? Like, come on, guys. That was bad. Okay. That's just bad script writing. Like, they ran out of villains and they wanted to make their remaining villain a good guy. So they were like, okay, well, Palpatine's back now. You know what I mean? And never gave an explanation for it. Like, that's the kind of thing I don't like, right? Or, Godzilla's explosive breath burrowing through the earth. That's just violating your own rules. I don't know.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of that's like my first principle. I don't know. And then I had another idea, which was like, you shouldn't have crazy stuff going on without having a good reason for it. You know what I mean? If that makes sense. So like, for instance, don't have hyperdrives unless you need to get from point A to point B really quickly, right? Right? Like, there's just no reason. You know what I mean? Like, or don't have magic wands if magic wands aren't going to have an important part of your story. Does that make sense? I don't know.
Yeah.
That's kind of my, like, you shouldn't have magic in the universe if the universe doesn't use, like, if the characters are never going to use magic.
Yeah. Well, I feel like that's like more like the storytelling.
Yeah. I mean, I think this is all like storytelling. Yeah.
Yeah. But no, I mean, yeah, obviously that's like that's the thing, like there. So yeah, no, also would agree with that one.
Yeah. I don't know. Do you have anything to add there with, like, do you think what kind of stuff really irritates you when you're reading a story with, like,
I don't know. I feel like, well, so first of all, you're saying reading, like, I feel like I don't ever read like fiction books.
Oh, really?
Like, it's not my thing. But if I'm like watching it's just been so, like, I literally can't remember the last, like, I don't know. I mean, I think the whole point of like a movie or whatever, like an action movie, like, again, I think it's like the whole point is to be like visually like engaging. Like when there's like explosions and like these like a bunch of cuts and like someone doing like parkour and like all that stuff, like it's just like it like keeps resetting like your goldfish brain every 5 seconds because there's a cut and then something big happens. There's a cut, something big happens. So it's like, I feel like that's just like that dopamine hit is like the whole point of like an action movie, is to just like,
yeah,
like, you know what I'm saying?
No, you're right. I think I'm probably being a little bit uncharitable here. However, I guess that for me, the total, like, look, for me to enjoy a fantasy or action or any sort of movie, I need to suspend belief. You know what I mean? I need to like believe that what's going on is possible. Yeah. And for me, anything that disrupts the suspension of belief like really irritates me because it yanks me out of the story, right? So that's like a good point. So like, for instance, in the recent Star Wars, Rey is able to levitate, and except she never uses that ability in combat or any other time. So like there's shots of her just randomly levitating with a bunch of stones, like sitting there like right? like some sort of monk who can levitate, right? But then her and her friends fall into quicksand. Why doesn't she levitate out of quicksand? Like they all almost die in quicksand. Why didn't, like, she'd already expressed that ability like hours earlier, right? Like maybe a week or two earlier in story time. I don't know exactly, but like there's 2 scenes where like Rey is levitating and then Rey is drowning in quicksand. Just use your levitation power, lady. You can fly. You know what I mean? Yeah. Or float temporarily at least. Okay, float yourself out and then pull your friends out with the force, right? It just seems like a lot of that sort of thing. Like I notice that kind of thing when I'm watching a movie, and I'm like, "What are you doing? Are you just stupid?" or are the script writers just stupid? Right? Like it disjoints the movie for me. If that makes sense, right? Like watching the tunnel scene in King Kong. What is this tunnel, right? Instead of like watching the movie and like, getting the dopamine hit, I'm sitting there like, yo, what the fuck is this tunnel? Where the fuck is it going? Why do you have a tunnel going from Pensacola, Florida to Hong Kong, right? How are you going 800 miles an hour in this tunnel, right? There were so many questions for me. Who funded this tunnel, right? Who explained this to the stockholders? Why did you guys have an $18 trillion deficit this quarter? Well, we decided to build a tunnel from Pensacola, Florida to Hong Kong. Imagine this, like that's what's going through my head. And that's not what should be going through my head in the middle of the movie. Maybe it's just me. I think maybe it's just me because my friends were getting annoyed with me. But
well, no, I'm sure it's, if someone else has to feel the same way.
I don't know.
It's someone out there somewhere has
Someone
to
out there is
like.
crazy like that.
No, not. I mean, I'm just saying, like, it's like if it bothered you, it probably bothered someone else as well.
Yeah.
Like, it's probably not just like isolated. But yeah, no, I think that's a good point. Like, I think anything that's so dumb that it breaks the like suspension of belief is, yeah, I mean, that would kind of ruin. I think that would ruin a movie for anyone. And also, I'm just gonna add in here. We're at 59 minutes and like 18
Okay,
seconds.
yeah, let's wrap it up.
So, but
yeah, sorry,
yeah.
continue. You were saying something.
No. I was just gonna say, like, yeah, like if you had anything you
Yeah,
want to talk
so
about
I
at the
mean,
end.
I guess my the conclusion of my rant is I think that sci-fi writers or fantasy writers, right? You don't have to listen to physics. Bonus points if it's physically plausible, but don't worry about it. Take your creative liberties, but make it consistent with itself. If there's going to be something crazy going on, like, sending a shipping container from Florida to Hong Kong via a tunnel through the earth, make there a good reason for it. Don't, like, there was no good reason there.
Yeah,
Like, super crazy stuff should have a plot point behind it so that, it's not just dumb. You know what I mean? And then, logical impossibilities also shouldn't be overcome by technology, right? So, like, Godzilla, like, drilling through the earth with his mouth breath, right? Like, no.
yeah,
No. Okay. You shouldn't paint yourself into a plot corner. Like, oh, well, our characters are now under the earth and it's going to take them hours to get back out. Okay, well, we'll just have Godzilla like drill a hole through the earth, right? That'll be more dramatic than showing them walking back out. Okay. Stuff like that. Like, don't make technology or magic or whatever an excuse for your lazy writing, I guess is my point. You know what I mean? I don't know.
yeah.
This technology should serve the plot, not like rescue the plot from whatever stupidity you've put it through. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's my general point. Okay, well, anyway, end rant. Sorry about that. It's a fun movie. I didn't hate it. I kind of hated it.
Yeah, I mean,
I
feel
enjoyed
like,
being mad about it.
Yeah, all these kinds of movies, like I feel like they're just always dumb.
Yeah.
Like I remember, I watched like the last King Kong one or whatever. And I was like, that was so dumb.
It's so
Like,
dumb. Val slept through the whole thing, and I was honestly jealous because I wish I'd slept through the whole thing. I'm like, I want my 2 hours of life back, man. Give it back.
Yeah.
I did not pick the movie to defend myself. But yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, anyway,
Well, if you want to do
not
the
not to
outro.
watch it now. Yeah, I think you're first on.
Oh,
that.
yeah. Okay. Well, thanks everyone for listening in. We had a great time talking about Gypsy Rose. I really honestly enjoyed hearing Kush's kind of perspective on that because I thought he made some really good points about if she really didn't have a choice there, maybe she's shouldn't have gone to jail, and maybe it really was self-defense depending on how complete her mother's control was and how extreme it was. I think that was a really interesting point, and I'm glad I actually learned about that. I hadn't really considered that. Also, we had a great time trashing King Kong versus Godzilla because I don't know, it just deserved it. And I think we came up with some good rules for would-be sci-fi writers. So anyway, thanks everyone for listening in. If you want to,
yeah, and if you enjoyed today's episode, please make sure to grab your nearest cargo container and absolutely smash it into that like button. And also, if you like what you heard today, please make sure to hit the subscribe button and notification bell. That way, every time we post a video, you get a notification on your phone. You click it, it takes you straight to the video, and you can just listen to it in the background while you cook, clean, eat, drive, whatever. And with that, we'll see you guys next week. Bye-bye.
bye-bye.